It's time to review this game. Yu-Gi-Oh! Early Days Collection is interesting in both good and bad ways, and as someone who grew up with OG Yu-Gi-Oh! And fell off during the Synchro to Link Summoning era, I love OG Yu-Gi-Oh! And all of my fond memories of buying booster packs from my local store, as well as my very first starter deck, #Kaiba. But this early day collection has quite a few interesting inclusions. Some of these titles kind of feel like either a sequel to a previous title or basically the same game, but with some improved visuals and some included rules like adding magic and trap cards and maybe changing the different characters you can battle against. So it's unclear if these titles, some of them, are either a sequel or just an updated version of a previous one. Now, there is a lot here in this collection, a lot of games that you can go through, but considering it follows games from the Game Boy all the way to the Game Boy Advance, some of these games you may not be interested in playing, and depending on how outdated they are, they may not be any good whatsoever. Now, the games included in this collection is Duel Monsters, Duel Monsters 2 Dark Duel Stories, Monster Capsule, Dark Duel Stories, Duel Monsters 4 Battle of Great Duelist, Dungeon Dice Monsters, The Eternal Duelist Soul, Duel Monsters 6 Expert 2, The Sacred Cards, Reshef of Destruction, Duel Monsters International Worldwide Edition, World Championship Tournament 2004, Destiny Board Traveler, and 7 Trials to Glory World Championship Tournament 2005. Now, as I mentioned earlier, a good portion of these games are very similar to one another, and I am unsure if they are considered a full-on sequel or just an updated version of its former counterpart. For example, Duel Monsters and Duel Monsters 2 look and feel very familiar, almost identical, with some minor improvements with the inclusion of better colors or even adding colors, some minor visual improvements, and maybe in addition to some rules like spell and trap cards. Now, the majority of these games are from that Game Boy and Game Boy Color era, which means they may be very nostalgic, but they also may not be very good. And this would typically follow a 1 card per turn rule with these earlier games, not allowing you to do all these different cards per move, like summoning, setting spells, and trap cards, like you would with some of the newer games in this collection. And these older titles, like Duel Monsters 1 and 2, do have a very basic UI, a very basic field, so not much to look at in these earlier titles. Now, Monster Capsule was quite fascinating as it reminded me of classic Pokemon Red and Blue in terms of your movement, but on a much smaller scale, and the whole capsule monster idea of playing them on a grid-like board, it took a bit to get used to, and I'm still learning it and still getting used to its mechanics, but I found it pretty fun, knowing that each monster has a specific space they can move to, a specific space they can attack from, and it has a lot of very interesting things behind it with the different monsters you can get, how to earn new monsters, the different people you can challenge, and even the story was quite interesting with Kaiba being the main bad guy of this game. And we all knew Kaiba has been a dick from the beginning, but this was more like a different kind of Kaiba from the anime. This was like a evil wizard spellcaster Kaiba or a Millennium item wielding Kaiba. So I wanted to see more of the game and see where the story really goes to. Now, Dark Duel Stories and Duel Monsters 4 Battle of Great Duelists are basically the same, as I said, with Duel Monsters 1 and 2, but they added some new rules like magic and trap cards. Yes, magic cards. This was before they changed the name to spell cards. And you also have different opponents that you can battle on screen compared to the originals from the first 2 games. Now, the difference with Duel Monsters 4, however, is this game, this collection includes 3 different versions of that game, one of which allowing you to use one of 3 decks, either Kaiba, Yugi, or Joey. The only real difference here is the cards that you will have access to in the version that you choose. So not as cool as something like Pokemon Red and Blue and Gold and Silver and Ruby and Sapphire, etc. Now, Dungeon Dice Monsters suck. I'm just gonna say that right away. I wasn't a fan of the introduction of this in the anime. I wasn't a fan of the board game that you could get, like actual physically board game they used to make. I wasn't a fan of the unnecessary Duke Devlin in the anime. And I didn't put a lot of time into this game to really learn how to play it. They don't really explain too much of the rules and how to play this game. There are some in-game manuals I believe you can read if you want to go through that, but again, I have no interest in Dungeon Dice Monsters. I don't care about Dungeon Dice Monsters, and I just didn't want to bother with it. And I just think it's not that great of Yu-Gi-Oh. I don't want to play Yu-Gi-Oh on a Dungeon Dice board. I want to play with the cards, and I get why this is here, but it wasn't for me. Now, Eternal Duelist Soul is probably when these games started to really grow in terms of visuals and animations compared to the previous titles, as long as the same inclusion or the same growth going forward with the other games in this collection. And if you don't know the classic cards by name, you will have to click on the card view so you can get a bigger picture, a zoomed in picture of the card and its effect on the side of the screen. But thankfully, I do know a lot of these cards by name and what they do. Granted, some of the cards in the game may not follow the same rules as their real life counterpart, like a Sangan, for example, may not have its real life effect in these video games, and it might just be a normal vanilla monster. But this game also had really smooth animations with the cards, going from your hand to the board and doing your turns. It felt one of the most smoothest out of this whole collection, which is saying a lot considering these are all very early basic handheld games, but I did feel like this game did have some cool improvements. Granted, there were some other games in this collection going forward that did feel a bit slower than this one, and we'll talk about those when we get there. But this game was fairly simple. You choose a character's image that you want to battle, and you go ahead and battle them. And it is a bit more of that traditional Yu-Gi-Oh style, like real life Yu-Gi-Oh, when it comes to setting and activating different magic and trap cards, setting monsters, using monster effects, doing different chains such as quick plays and counter traps, attack form, defense, all that kind of stuff. It's all basically here in this title. And the game doesn't really have much of a story as far as I can tell, other than you just choose a character and you battle and you unlock cards as you go along. But it did feel good being able to do something as cool as summoning a summoned skull to just help obliterate my enemies. And I had a bit more fun with this game, which is surprising considering how basic the game is. And there is some really nice soundtrack to this game. It may get annoying after a while, but it was a little bit relaxing, I'm not gonna lie. And I'm sure that the moving background will get really annoying very quickly for some people, but you are able to use different field spell cards to change the background if you have them in your deck, so that's something. Now, Duel Monsters 6 Expert 2 is the only game in the collection that does not have an English translation, an English version, and it didn't make the game unplayable, but it was a bit difficult to play for various reasons. Number one is the obvious no English translation and trying to navigate the game's menu and knowing what you're doing, especially if there's some cards you don't recognize, not knowing what they do or how to play with those cards. But the other thing about this game that was very challenging is the challenge level. I think the title isn't just a catchy title. The game is a bit more of an advanced game. I even went and battled my Valentine, who managed to summon a Cyber Harpy plus 2 Harpy Lady Sisters and boost all 3 of their attacks individually in one turn. And I had to just forfeit my match because I couldn't compete it. Meanwhile, I actually have a more advanced Harpy Lady deck in my possession that I own physically, not in the game. A Harpy Lady deck with Link Summoning and XZ monsters and all the other new Harpy Lady cards. And I can't win a duel with that deck to save my life. But in this game, Mai can just obliterate me in only one turn. Now, it's been a while since I played Yu-Gi-Oh! In real life. Maybe I should go to my local card shop and play again. But this game is definitely an expert level game, especially when you can't read the translation. The game, there's no translation, so that makes it even more challenging. Now, the next couple of games in this collection, in my opinion, might be the reason why you would buy this package, why you would buy this collection. And that's with the Sacred Cards and the Chef of Destruction. I'm going to put these two together because I think they might be direct sequels from one another. I don't know for sure, but they do have very similar play style. They have the same overworld map, a very similar story that looks like it is a continuation. And the game does give me some minor vibes of Pokemon games where you get to run around this overworld and they give you your own character to play as. That's not the main character. You're not Yugi. You are your own new character that you play as, and you get to run around and battle other trainers. But the overworld here is not as big as in Pokemon. You're not going to get that same somewhat open world feeling in these games that you do in the Pokemon games. Now, with the Sacred Cards, the story, if you are unfamiliar, is You basically are a new trainer and you're friends with the group, and you're just reliving the events of the Battle City tournament. But you would get one of the 3 god cards in this game, and Yugi's not the main protagonist. It's pretty much you as the main protagonist. And I believe Reshef of Destruction is the sequel to this game, as that story is focused on the god cards losing their power to eventually boost up Reshef's power so that he can take over and destroy the world. But that game in particular did take a lot of time to get into, because the game starts off with so much talking and so much story explanation. Ashizu Ishtar is one of my favorite characters in the anime, but in this game, she would not shut the hell up for the life of me. But eventually you get going and you can go battle trainers and go through the story. This is a game that I never owned back in the day, so I will be putting much more time into this game. Whereas I did finish Sacred Cards back when I owned it on the Game Boy Advance. But what's interesting here is that game, from what I remember, only allowed you to have one of the 3 god cards towards the end of the game. But there is a feature in this collection that gets you access to every card in the game unlocked, and as many copies as you want. I believe up to maybe 9 or whatever. I have 3 copies of each card that I unlock. And you can add the 3 god cards into your deck if you wanted to. You can add a Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, which is not a fusion in these games. It's a divine monster, so it just needs 3 sacrifices to summon, and that's pretty cool for these games. But these games also have some rule differences, like Sangan, for example, as I said earlier, might not have its real life rule in the game, and here it doesn't either. It's treated as a vanilla monster with no effect, which is odd considering Witch of the Black Forest is in the games, and I believe she has her effect, but Sangan doesn't, so that was pretty odd. And when it comes to these 2 games, as I said before, I believe they're direct sequels, and they do have that more story-driven aspect to it. You have a full story that you get to explore, and a little area, you get to go to different spots on the map and then explore that little hub area to find other trainers and go through the story further and further. But again, I do want more of a traditional Pokemon-like style Yu-Gi-Oh game, an RPG Yu-Gi-Oh game that has more exploration. That would be really cool, but these are pretty decent here. Now, next in the collection is Duel Monsters International Worldwide Edition, and it's very similar to Duel Monsters 6 Expert 2 in the sense that it might be the same game but with options for translation to different languages. It might be a totally different game or a sequel that looks exactly the same but is in English, but it looks and feels exactly the same as the Expert 2 game, just in English so I can read what's going on, and I guess other characters that you can battle, but it has the same UI, same interface, same cutscenes. So I don't know if it's just the English version of that game that they couldn't include into one title and had to split it into 2 different titles, but that's essentially what you're going to get with this version of that title. But also similar to some of the earlier titles in this game, nothing really special here. You choose an area you want to go to, choose someone you want to battle, you battle, and then you rinse and repeat. So nothing really that special in Duel Monsters International Worldwide Edition. Now, next is World Championship Tournament 2004, and it's once again one of those, nothing really special to a story or anything, no RPG elements here. You just choose a character, you battle, rinse and repeat. That's about it. But it does have some stats on the characters that you're going to battle. It shows you, I guess, some of the strengths and weaknesses. There's also some empty slots in the character selector that you want to battle, so that tells me you can unlock other characters throughout the game progression. But again, there's nothing special in terms of an RPG mechanic. You're just battling on to the next one, so that one is kind of boring in a way. Destiny Board Traveler was almost as complicated or even more complicated than the Dungeon Dice Monsters game. I felt that this game did an even poorer job explaining what the rules are and what's going on here. Again, you could probably read the in-game manual and maybe that'll explain more, but I couldn't figure out for the life of me what was going on in this little tiny square board game, and it really is a very small board game. I got to parts of the game where I didn't know how to properly roll a dice to move spaces. I didn't know how to summon a monster for my battles, and I would just take direct damage because I had no monster to summon. It doesn't really explain too much about what I'm doing here, what I'm supposed to do, why I'm here, but you do get to choose a character that you want to play as, and the characters do have some very basic voice acting, voice dialogue, so it's really funny to see a little miniature Kaiba trash talking his enemies when in fact I spent my time getting destroyed by Joey Wheeler in this game. So that's just something I need to either learn if I want to learn it and play the game more, or just skip it. It is, I've been told, very similar to a Mario Party style game, but I'm better off just playing Mario Party than this board game here.
Which pathetic fool wants to lose first?
And finally, we have 7 Trials to Glory World Championship Tournament 2005. This one, I don't know if it's considered a sequel to Sacred Cards and Red Chef of Destruction. It does have a similar playstyle where you get to choose an area and run around little small hub areas and battle other duelists and interact with duelists. I don't know what the full story is supposed to be here. It did skip the opening cutscene for me with Mr. Moto explaining some things because I did use the enhancement to unlock all the cards, so I have to go back and see what the story is, but you essentially run around Battle City and can find trainers and battle them. But no specific RPG story elements that I could see so far, but I'm sure there's something like that here. That has to be, considering the type of gameplay. Now, I did feel that this game both simultaneously moved a bit smoother and a bit laggy and clunky in your duels, and specifically, I felt like your opponent's turns would move very smooth, very quick. They will make their moves and be done, but when it's your turn, the cards just move very slow. The cursor moved very slow, summoning monsters, attacking. It just felt like it was laggy and clunky and didn't move as smoothly as it should. Even Red Chef of Destruction had some slight improvements to the performance compared to the Sacred Cards, where the game did move a bit quicker in your duels. But here, I felt both of them. You could move quickly when your opponent is going, but then when it's your turn, it moves slower. And Little Yugi is a damn cheater in this game in 7 Trials because he summoned his Blackluster Soldier on his first turn, and I don't recall him using the ritual card to sacrifice the monsters needed from his hand or field. I think he just played the ritual card and just summoned Blackluster Soldier, no cards in the graveyard. Maybe I'm wrong there, but Little Yugi sucks. And Yugi in general, he sucks. He's a cheater. Kaiba all day. Now, this game did also have some of the more real-life effects for the cards in the game as they're supposed to, like Sangan, for example, as I keep bringing it up, I believe it does have its real-life effect in this game, and I bring it up because it's important for me to get my Exodia to my hand and see that Exodia animation. I've never seen it before, I never had this game specifically, so I want to see Exodia for myself in my game. Now, as I mentioned, yes, there's an enhancement to unlock every card in the game, and a few copies of them you can have, so I was able to add 3 Blue Eyes White Dragons to some of my decks in some of these games. I could add the Exodia pieces and the earlier titles from the Game Boy and Game Boy Color. It's really difficult and time consuming to change the cards in your deck, and when it comes to games like Sacred Cards with Chef of Destruction, 7 Trials to Glory, it is still slow and takes a while to actually get your deck to where you want it to be by moving cards back and forth between your deck and your trunk. But you do have a visual image of these cards with these newer Game Boy Advance games, so it's slightly easier. It just takes a lot of time to really get into it and to actually make it happen. Now, the game also has a rewind feature, so you might make a mistake on a turn. I sometimes end my phase when I meant to go to a battle phase. I might sometimes forget to activate a trap card or a magic card to stop my opponent from doing something. So thankfully you can rewind in this game and redo what mistake you took. In the games that do unlock booster packs as you defeat duelists, if you get a booster pack with crappy cards, you can rewind it and pick that booster pack again, and it'll randomize those cards again and reshuffle. So you might try to find a Dark Magician or a Red Eyes Black Dragon, but just be prepared to rewind over and over again to get that Red Eyes or the Dark Magician rare card that you want. Now, there is an online mode, but it's only for Duel Monsters 4 Battle of Great Duelists, and that's one of those very old, very basic, crappier games, and I don't want to play that. If I'm going to play online Yu-Gi-Oh! And you want to play online Yu-Gi-Oh!, you're better off playing either Master Duel or getting Legacy of the Duelist Link Summoning, as those titles will have a better online gameplay for you. It'll have better cards, it'll have more updated cards. Master Duel will have more newer cards, as that is still being constantly updated, whereas Legacy of the Duelist I don't think is getting updated anymore, so you're not going to see any of the much newer cards like all the new Exodia support that we got a few months ago or so. They're not going to be in Legacy of the Duelist, so that's unfortunate. But at least Legacy of the Duelist does cover the major story parts of all of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Animes from the OG Yu-Gi-Oh! Up until Reigns, having a decent number of duels there as well. But Legacy of the Duelist was a fun game. It just was limited with the story. It's just reading the cutscenes and going to the duel, no exploration of a map, no RPG elements, but they had a lot of cards in that game, and they had a decent online mode, and they even had a challenge mode in that game. So you do get only one game in Legacy of the Duelist, but you do have a few more modes you can play compared to this one. This game also doesn't have, this collection doesn't have any artwork like you see in the Castlevania games, with the exception of the original box art and the in-game manuals, but there's no like artwork of the characters and the monsters, you know, no Blue Eyes White Dragon artwork, no Dark Magician artwork, Dark Magician Girl, Red Eyes Black Dragon. You don't get any of that here. And that's a bit unfortunate. You are able to change the aspect ratio of the screen and make the image bigger, but some of these games may not display as well on a bigger screen as they would on a smaller screen, like in handheld, for example. Now, I will say that the game is only $50, which is not bad for price in terms of gaming costing $70, and Nintendo might reach $70 indefinitely going forward with the Switch 2, but there is a lot of games in this collection. Now, there is those really crappy ones, the old school, the old outdated ones, the stinkers in this package. So it's up to you to decide, is $50 worth buying the game based on how many games are included, or it's not worth the price because a good number of those games you may not even bother with and you may not want to jump into. Especially when some of these games that you might want to play, like the Game Boy Advance games, I'm pretty sure you can just emulate them and play them that way. I mean, I did. But I am hoping that this collection will open the door for Konami to make more Yu-Gi-Oh collections. Like they have 3 separate Castlevania collections. I want to see more of the Yu-Gi-Oh games in a collection. The PS1 games, the PS2 games, the PSP GX games, the DS games have some really cool ones on DS. Like Nightmare Troubadour was a really good one of my favorite ones back in the day. And I want to see these games come back with another collection and just put more Yu-Gi-Oh out there for everybody. You know, Forbidden Memories and Duelist of the Roses, those are some old school games that I want to see. So, if you can ignore some of these old Game Boy and Game Boy Color games, or if you want to try them out, and like I said, Monster Capsule was pretty interesting. I do like that one. I want to play that one a bit more. And you are really just going for Chef of Destruction, Sacred Cards, and Seven Trials to Glory. If that's your main reason for this package, you're better off probably just emulating those games specifically. But if you want to play all the games, you want to try them all out, $50 is not terrible, but it could be a bit better. They could have done maybe $40 for this collection. You do also get 1 of 2 copies of a Heartbeat Feather Duster in a 25th century secret rare, I think it was. I got the ugly one. I didn't get the cool one, so you might get the cool one, whereas I got the ugly one. So that is unfortunate. But that is my review of Yu-Gi-Oh! Early Days Collection. Holy Slifer Balls, this was a big one. There was a lot of games here, but let me know in the comments what you think about this game. Do you think it's lackluster? Do you think it's worth every penny? Do you want to play more of this game? I just noticed I don't think a single game here has Maximilian Pegasus. Maybe one of the earlier ones, as you need to beat each duelist 5 times to progress through the story. So maybe Pegasus is in the game or in some of the games, but I just noticed I didn't see him yet in my playthrough. So that is very weird that Maximilian Pegasus I haven't seen yet. But that's my video for today. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys all on the next one. Bye for now.